All right, I'm giving a talk today on TypeScript 2 and failing fast. This is my first DevOps, first Java conference. So I wanted my talk to get accepted, so I thought I got to put something pithy and clever in the talk title, something that connotes success. And so the word failing came straight to mind, and this is a talk about failing fast with JavaScript, with TypeScript, trying to change your front-end tooling to give you faster feedback on teams and stuff like that. I'm Paul Everitt. I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains. I work on PyCharm and WebStorm. I do not work on Java. If you have any Java questions, I'm not the person for you. And I thought it's kind of clever that I'm a Python guy. My background is, I started using Python in 1993 for www.navy.mil, a long time ago. And since then, I've stayed in the Python world, the JavaScript world, and I just think it's kind of funny that for a talk on bringing typing to JavaScript at a Java conference, they're getting a Python guy to give that talk. It's just pretty funny. I guess they wanted a world expert, and all of those people were unavailable. This talk will be magnificently boring if there aren't any questions. I think I'm already too loud. So even if you have to fake it, or if you want to ask like, what's for lunch tomorrow, please ask some kinds of questions. Keep us all awake. We just had lunch. I ate 2 cookies. I admit, they were good. And so we're all going to be dragging a little bit. And so I will start the kickoff with, who has ever used TypeScript? Oh, I got a different question. Who can see me over this podium? All right. Thank you, DevOps, for giving me the mini-me version of the podium. But for those of you that have used TypeScript, how many of you have used TypeScript without Angular? All right. What did you, if I can ask, what did you use it with?
TypeScript could work with a lot of JavaScript. So
okay.
You have to really use TypeScript-specific features.
Yep. In fact, I'll come back to that in just a second. What did you use TypeScript with? Oh, okay. Let me ask both of you a question on that. Was it a positive experience?
Yes.
All right. I have to admit, this is a beginner-oriented talk. So if you're looking for deep typing, can I say bullshit? Then you've got the wrong Python guy for that, mister. Instead, I'm going to try and give a little bit different flavor of a talk. And the point of the talk is about failing fast. JavaScript is dynamic. Yay! We could do hello world in like 0.7 characters. Ooh, Java, you can't do that. JavaScript is dynamic. Boo! You have no idea how you screwed up until many years down the line. So the emergence of Microsoft's TypeScript, partially because of the deal with Angular and with Google to replace ATScript, is a very clever one. It's still JavaScript. It's just a small little superset. You can use none of it in the beginning, kinda. The typings will get in the way a little bit. And then you can gradually use a little bit more and buy into more of the Kool-Aid. And with this, as you do this, the TypeScript compiler will tell you you've made a big mistake instead of having to guess later, or I'm sure all of you JavaScript developers have 100% unit test coverage on all of your web applications, but still. And then this compiler idea of typing and failing faster combines with tools like WebStorm from us and Visual Studio Code and some other tools to give you a visual feedback to say that you screwed up. And what does this get for you? When you're programming in the large, like Java applications might be, or these days larger JavaScript applications such as Angular, there's you just trying to get stuff done, and then there's that framework which you love, which might be changing at a very rapid rate. The contract between you and it, if that contract is hope for the best, you're in trouble. TypeScript can help improve that contract. Kind of the same thing for a team of developers where the smart gals are creating the high value stuff and the junior guys are consuming it, that contract between the two, if it's expressed in like doc strings, that might not be enough to keep up with the pace of change. And then finally, this is the one that I joked about having Alzheimer's. It's a joke. It's kind of not that funny. There's code that I write, and I go back and I'm like looking around like, who? That guy's an idiot. Oh, that was me. The future me really doesn't like the current me. And so the current me tries to give some self-defense for the future me by trying to express more intent in the code. TypeScript lets you say that's a number, not a string. It lets you say many other kind of decisions, bake them into something that's enforced rather than just a convention. So for this talk, we're going to talk a little bit about TypeScript just as ES6. Raise your hand if you've heard of ES6. Briefly, the JavaScript language is actually changing again, and they found a way to change it in a way that doesn't require browsers to stay up to date all the time through something called transpiling. So ES6, ECMAScript 6, is a flavor of JavaScript turned into year-based ES 2015, 2016, 2017, which includes a lot of innovations. And TypeScript, even if you don't buy into the typing, you're going to get that ES6 stuff, and the JavaScript or the TypeScript compiler acts as an ES6 transpiler so that old browsers can still use it. Then I'm going to show TypeScript, typing, but I'm going to do it outside of Angular. I have to admit, in the program, it says this is an Angular talk. On the way here, the Angular language service, a recent innovation to allow tooling to turn over the work of parsing and handling Angular TypeScript kinds of constructs, caused me a lot of problems. So I dialed back the Angular part. It's like the last third. And then, so we finish in the end with failing faster in Angular, showing how Angular as a big TypeScript project, and then the WebStorm project manager just slacked me. And then as a consumer of this big Angular TypeScript project, I can write TypeScript and know the changes they've made and whether I'm out of date. Any questions on what the hell is TypeScript before we begin? Any comments about any of the points made so far? Raise your hand if you are a TypeScript god. Okay, someone's lying. Someone's going to ask me a question I don't know the answer to. So in this first phase, we're just going to do some preparation work on ES6 in TypeScript. It includes some of these features from ES6, ES 2015, etc. We're going to show these features in action. We're going to show them in Node. We're not going to have a browser around at all. We're going to sit in WebStorm. I'm going to click a little button. It's going to run some stuff and show some output. I decided to reinforce this idea of producer-consumer, whether the producer is Angular and the consumer is you, or the producer is a senior developer and you're a junior developer, or the producer is the current you and the consumer is the future you. I want to show this in action in a very visual way, and so I'm going to be the consumer in test-driven development. I'm going to run under Mocha and consume some TypeScript stuff so you can see a little bit about that contract in action. More specifically, I can click a little button in WebStorm, it'll run things automatically, and that's so cute. But I'm trying to convince myself that there's an actual teaching point on this. So the very first thing we're going to do is show this environment TDD. This really doesn't have that much to do with TypeScript. So over in WebStorm, I'm going to have the code that I will eventually start writing on the left. I'm going to have my tests over here on the right. And I'm going to just say expect 1 to be 1. Or I'll say equal, deep. All right. And so it's running, and I'm going to run the test suite. It's going to run side by side. And then I'm going to click this guy so that it runs automatically, so that as I type every 2 seconds, it will rerun everything and pass or fail. So this is the kind of environment for the presentation that I'm on. Code will be, I'll do some coding here, but later I'll move the code over and import it, and we will gradually build up some tests. Yeah. I did. Good point. Yeah. Trish, is that better? I've got 1,600 pixels, so I can make it bigger. Let's go with 20. All right. But that doesn't make this, well, that's kind of noise down there anyway. Okay, on to the next one. Let's do a little bit more from ES6, aka ES 2015. Let's do vars and this new thing called a const. So I could say something like var d equal 1, and then expect d to equal 1. And the test runs fine on that, except WebStorm is telling me this thing in a font that is pretty small. Var used instead of let or const, what does that mean? Well, in JavaScript, var has had a long and sordid history about lexical scoping rules and things like that. And so ES6, aka ES 2015, came up with 2 new keywords to replace var. Const, which is used when the primitive value won't be reassigned, and something else called let. So I'm going to go to the var, I'm going to ask WebStorm to help me here a little bit, and I'm going to convert this to const. My warning goes away, and my code still works fine. If I were to try and say d equals 2, not only would my test fail, but the TypeScript compiler is actually going to warn me with a reasonably helpful error message, dude, can't reassign a const. I think that would be a better error message than this. So we will not reassign that const. All right, so we saw var and const. What about this other guy called let? I'll do another example. Fails again, same error message. So what I want instead is a let. And the word let as a keyword appears in all kinds of places, including in Angular templates. Get my test passing again. And try to change your code away from vars to either const or let. Most of the time you can use a const, try and use a const. Yakov, at any time when you know I'm saying something that is incorrect, you stick that hand up and you tell me, all right? Nicely. I've got a fragile ego. On to another thing from ES6, aka ES 2015 and friends. By the way, these things are actually implemented in modern evergreen browsers. When you start thinking about life after IE 6, 7, or 8, a lot of these things are available without transpiling, and class is one of them. So I'm going to create an ES6 class, and then I'm going to write a test to see if it exists. It'll be a pretty simple class that does nothing. And then I'm going to let d equals new directory and expect d to okay, so I used the new keyword, which we've seen in JavaScript forever and ever, but those are for built-in kinds of objects, or the object kind of thing that has the constructor in it, not something that looks like a class. Sure, this is lexical sugar, maybe around underlying prototype type behavior, but for us, for all intents and purposes, from a TypeScript perspective, it behaves like what we would expect from object orientation, an actual class. Classes have much more than just a couple of squirrely brackets, so let's put a class property on. Let's write a test. Let's make the test fail and scratch our head, why did that test fail? And then use WebStorm's debugger to set a breakpoint at the place of the failure and take a look around. So I can go in here and I can say title equals Acme. And I can say does d.title to equal Acme. So that works. But let's say it was actually, oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was name, and I wrote a test that said name. Well, the TypeScript compiler gives me some help. It's already done its job of failing faster. WebStorm or Visual Studio Code will put a squiggly line. And if you open up this tool panel, the TypeScript tool panel, you'll see all of the compiler warnings across your entire project. So what the hell did I do wrong? I'm going to set a breakpoint here, and I'm going to go to, I'll go to the, yeah, and run the debugger. Actually, no, because it's not compiling as TypeScript at all. So let's just say it wasn't the value that I thought it was. I thought it was going to be that value. And then I can stop in the context, and I can do all those badass visual debugger things that you would expect. I can set watches, I can step into code, step over code, step into my library code, multiple breakpoints, breakpoint conditions, watch expressions, blah, 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 blah. All right. I'll get you passing again. Good. So we have a class, which is a bold new thing already from the future of JavaScript in TypeScript. And we've got a class property. Let's take one more step so that I can get over to working on code instead of doing everything in the test. Let's do an import. Raise your hand if you have done an import in JavaScript with any technology whatsoever. Require, JS, or anything like that. Not too many. Kind of hard to imagine something calling itself an actual programming language that was created with no semantics for importing code from one module to another. The people behind the TC49 committee, is that the name of it? 7? 3? 3, okay. The ECMAScript committee that is behind all these standards is sorting through all this. It has been an incredible journey for them, trying to both preserve some level of backward compatibility with Node.js's import system, and then also work in this web model where you send off a request to import something, maybe it comes back, maybe it doesn't, maybe it comes back after the other thing that imported it, blah, blah, blah. So we have some technologies, including TypeScript, which will let us do imports now. So I'm going to move my class over to a separate file, import it, and do my tests. This guy, I'm going to take it out. In order to make this symbol visible from the outside, I have to export it in some fashion. You can export several symbols or one as the default. I'm just doing this symbol not as the default. So now I've got something over here which is broken. Directory no longer exists because I haven't imported it. I'll have my tool do the import for me. And now I pass again. And so I've taken a nice little step into modern web development. I can have multiple files. They're not stitched together in HTML script tags. They actually semantically, lexically can be pointed at each other. I can break things by renaming. If you did this with script tags, take you a while to know that you made a mistake here. Okay, so that's my imports. Again, the whole idea of failing faster. As soon as I put that X in front of directory, my tool told me that I was screwed. Or my test told me that I was screwed, but my tool definitely told me that I was screwed. Linting, I will just kind of wave over this one a little bit and not go through all these steps. We all expect to have linters. The world JavaScript has had linters over the years. TypeScript also has linters. This field actually has gotten very interesting in the last couple of years with ESLint, TSLint, shipping different packages you can install to buy into standards from different people. So I'm going to go back to here and run you again. I think you got out of sync. Yep. And if I did npm install as a development dependency tslint, which I've already done, then in my tool, I can go to the configuration panel to enable it. And I'm going to enable tslint. Here's its module. I'm going to tell it to look for a configuration file that has all the rules for my linting. Let's take a look at that guy. And for example, let's say I change my mind. Double is the new single. Then everywhere in my code, I'm going to get a warning from the tool telling me exactly what that error was. And then there are many different ways I can override it just for this line, just for this file, or I can go back and, as God intended, put it back to single. Just out of curiosity, for JavaScript, who uses single quotes? The good guys. Who uses double quotes? Yeah, no one's going to raise their hand now. Do you really, Brendan? Brendan, come on. Come on. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's your reminder for when you're in JSON, right? All right, before switching over to the TypeScript part, that is the non-TypeScript TypeScript. That's ES6 with the TypeScript compiler. Any questions on ES6 stuff, imports, classes? Any comments to add to what I've said? Yes?
I would add that let keyword also allows block scoping.
Let allows block scoping, yes. And that winds up solving many problems that JavaScript developers have jumped through their butts trying to fix over the years. Yep. Oh, I should point out, this thing right here is probably weird looking for JavaScript developers. That's called an arrow function. It's an anonymous inline function whose lexical rules and all of that, it's not just syntactically way more convenient, it actually behaves more correctly in the scope that it's in. Okay, let's do some TypeScript. First thing, let's put some typing into my constructor, pass in an argument for the title to the constructor. So I've got a class over here. I don't have a constructor, so let me start a constructor. I'm going to put in a title. And TypeScript tells me I failed. I know I failed. By default, things are public, but I'll go ahead and be more specific. So I need to put in Acme. Oop. 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 There we go. Oh, uppercase. All right, duplicate identifier title, yes. So I need to get rid of that because I'd already had a field for that. So all my code works again. I'm passing in an argument, and I'm saying that this is public. If I were to say that this was private, then I would have a TypeScript compiler error shown to me in my UI because TypeScript has public, private, and protected as different rules for things you can put on fields. So you put that back to, ooh, actually I will use the handy dandy, nope. So we're starting to get into a little bit of TypeScript. TypeScript has a concept of public, private, and protected. Next thing is, like, for example, I can say d.title equals 42. That works, even though it was a, I'll leave it at 42 and leave the test passing. Even though I passed in Acme, I reassigned it, Acme is a string, 42 is an integer. TypeScript didn't complain. Why didn't it complain? Because I haven't done any typing yet. So what I will do is I will put typing information on here and say this is a string. And now I will get an error. The consumer of my code was made very painfully aware of my intent because I put a type constraint on that value. That kind of thing helps in large code bases. It helps when you're consuming a framework. And in fact, when I am going to, oh, I'll do that later. Get my test passing again. Let me go ahead and put another value in. I'll say code. And in this case, this isn't something that I am defining in the string. I'm defining it on the class and saying whenever you have something called code, it's going to be a number. So I can, after the fact, say d.code equals 42. And that works because by default it's public. But if after the fact I said string 42, then the compiler would be mad at me because that is not what it's allowed to be. Let's take a look at this private thing. I'm reassigning code, the field code, from outside of the class. From the consumer is peeking into the instance and jamming a value on. If I say that this is private, then this is going to be a compiler error. Because private means this can only be reassigned inside the class. This one succeeds, but this one fails. And my test pass again. Because this is inside the class. There's one other thing called protected. This is really only useful in inheritance hierarchies. Any questions so far on typing? Any points to add? Yes?
Can you make the const in the type casting?
Up here? Const is not something, that's interesting. I don't think you can. In order to indicate that it's read-only? Immutable. Immutable. I don't think you can. I think const is more of a lexical scoping thing. I think that, do you know if TypeScript, Yakov, do you know if TypeScript has a way to encode in the type information that something is immutable?
There is some qualifier read-only.
Okay.
And you can use static, but that's not the same.
That's not the same, right? Static is the thing that never behaves exactly the same as I think it does. Okay, onward. What if we have not just a single value, but a list of values? So in this example, we're going to add another method. It's going to return a list of employees. And we want to get some type information on that. We're going to add a test to test the length. We want to show producer-consumer again, having the test have some self-defense against the code that it's testing. So for example, list employees. It's going to return Paul. So I'm going to come over here. Instead of making another test, I will just say const employees equals d.list employees. I get auto completion. And expect d employees.length to equal 3. So my test pass. But I'm not really getting too much value from typing on this. I'm not really saying what is the return value of this. And then I can't really use that over here for any kind of help. So let's add type information about the return value. And this is going to be a bunch of strings. So the type is string, and then you put this afterwards to say that it's a sequence of strings. Did I put that in the wrong place? I did. Let's see if this can sniff out the return type. So that isn't exactly what I want. I'll go back to string. And then over here, as self-defense between the test and the code that it's testing, let's do the same thing. So I will say a list of strings. So that if Paulie boy, future Paul, comes along and changes this to a bunch of numbers, and I'll just say 9, 10, then this code is fine, but the test fails. Sure, the test, actually the test would pass if I put one more thing in there, because there's 3. But I'm not getting back the thing I expected. I would have to change this to a number. So this is self-defense between the code being tested and the code that's the code that's being produced and the code that's using it. Let me go back to string. All right, next thing I want to do is a method to add people.
What's the difference between capital string and lowercase string?
Lowercase string is, I don't believe, is a TypeScript type. It's something else that was found in the autocomplete. I don't think you can say, can you? Okay, I didn't know you could do lowercase. You can do lowercase? Yeah. I've never seen the examples of that anywhere.
Types are done in lowercase, but as an object, it's uppercase.
Ah. I'm going to have a method to add a new employee to the list. And then for the add, I'm going to show putting type information on the function argument, the method argument. So add employee, I'm going to pass in an employee, and I'm going to say I need to add to the list of employees. So I'm going to take this, move it to the constructor, which is going to lead to a type failure, and I'm going to ask you to create that for me, but I'll actually make it string like that. And so this dot employees. And now I want to push onto that the passed in employee. At this point, I want to test it. I want to add another employee. And it just gave me some help. It told me the argument, and it currently says any because I don't have any type information on it. The return value is void. So I'm going to say Joe. But I want to add the type information. I want to say, let's be clear about this. You can maybe try and pass me a number. And in some ways that will work, but it's really violating the list of strings. So instead, I want to make, well, I'll put that back as a failure mode. I want to make it clear that you need to pass in a string. And so this, the TypeScript compiler now fails automatically. I have to go back to Joe. If I wanted to be very clear about the return value, TypeScript can infer that I didn't return anything, so it knows it's void. I can specify it explicitly. On to something a little bit more fun, bags of data. Let's say that employee isn't just a string, and employee is a number in a string. Something all of us feel deeply about our employeeship. So for example, instead of just adding Joe, I need to say ID of 5 and name of Joe. And maybe department sales. I've got a failure because it's no longer a string. well, how can I represent something that is multiple values? I'm going to make an interface to define my bag of data. And so now I can say, actually, they're passing in this interface called employee. It's a bag of data. It's an object with some values in it that conforms to this interface. Now, this is failing because instead of a list of strings, it now needs to be a list of employees. And then these need to get changed to see, I got autocomplete now that I've got an interface. And this is no longer a return value of list of strings, it's a list of employees. All this code is now good. And my test needs to change. It needs to be my tool was able to look and find this symbol that I created called employee. I hit enter, it generates the import for me, and I should be at, I believe, 2 employees now. Now that worked out pretty well. We enforced an interface in code, we have tests, we can say this bag of data has a certain structure. But what if not everybody is in a department? Maybe Joe, when he's first hired, we haven't decided what to do with him yet. Jill is in a department, but Joe isn't. I can solve that by putting a question mark. And so now the interface will be considered valid whether department is there or isn't there. That is the tiny step into 400 pounds of type theory that I don't understand. There's lots and lots, especially with TypeScript 2, lots and lots of ways to model the shape of your classes and data and interfaces and contracts and things like that. I want to make sure we have enough time to get into the Angular stuff, so I'm going to skip over, well, I'll just show one thing. Let's say that I have in my test or somewhere else in my code just a freestanding variable called department. I can rename this to division. And all the cases in the interface usage are renamed, but not that freestanding variable, because TypeScript understands code rather than lexical strings and things like that. And you can do find usages and extract and other things on the structure of the TypeScript. Where's the Angular that was in the title? We're going to do a few things, a quick tour, a component, take a look at how TypeScript is put to work. We'll start with the first thing, a quick tour. I'm in a TypeScript project. I'm going to fire this puppy up. And I'm going to go over to my browser once it gets transpiled. Takes a little bit of time the first time it fires up. After that, it's the transpiling's faster. And I've got an application with one route in it. I can generate a new component. And my tool makes this easy for me. I can make a new component. I'll call it directory. And it will put out a bunch of code on disk for the new components. I'm going to wire this into the interface and start taking a look at some of the TypeScript part of it. So I'm going to go to the component, the module which has the various routes in it. Right now there's only one route. And I want to add another route to go to that component I just added. Notice that I can autocomplete on things in this bag of data. It's a sequence of not class instances, just of objects. I'll show why we can do this in just a second. So this is directory, component, autocomplete, directory component, It generates the import for me. And I can, in the template, and now I have 2 routes. Let's take a look at how TypeScript helped us on this. We're going to pick apart several things on this. If I look at this router module.for root, it's passed an argument. It's passed, in this case, a single argument, a list of objects. How did TypeScript know, and how did my tool know, what were the properties for those objects? I'm going to jump to that function definition. And it's a static method on the module, and it has an argument called routes that conforms to this definition. When I jump to that, routes is a sequence of route objects, and this is what it looks like. This is how my tool knows, this is how the compiler knows that if I said path X, that's a failure, because that's not allowed in this object. Why is it not allowed? Because it is not one of these fields in this interface. In the old days of Angular 1, you'd just be screwed. You'd put something in there. Maybe it would work, maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe last year it worked, but this year it doesn't work. Maybe the thing you read on Stack Overflow was right at one point, but is no longer right. In the world of Angular 2, with TypeScript, we can enforce all of these decisions, and as Angular changes from version to version, they ship new type information to let you know what is and isn't possible. Before I go on, Yakov, do you have anything you want to add to that part about TypeScript and Angular?
I would say that they are located, TypeScript definition files are located now in vmware.org in the organization path.
So I will open up my package.json and show it. There's these weird dependencies at Angular something. This was a move from the old ways of installing type information where first you had to get a .d test and then typings.
That's actually Angular. If you go down into the dev dependencies, it says add types. That's your types.
Well, these are the types for the non-Angular projects. The
That's actually Angular. That's not types for Angular. Angular core is Angular core.
But it contains, isn't that the NPM package that contains the type definitions for?
The standard now is to embed types in your product.
Right.
In your library.
Right.
Yeah, they're in there, but you're not going to get that to get the types for Angular. If you don't.
Yeah. Sorry. Right. There's not this two-step thing where you manage your types separate from the code.
But if you do have something that doesn't have types, you have to do at types.
Right. Yeah, I skipped over the Lodash example where I was going to show a non-TypeScript project where the types are not in the project because it's not in TypeScript. All right, so I also showed that the changes are loaded automatically, but that's not that important for this. And in routing, we showed about looking at the interface that's behind all of this. One of the things I could do is take this guy and extract it into its own variable as a const. Now my route information is up here, and I could put a type information on that called routes so that I could think a little more clearly about my routes. I could even take each one of these segments and put them down in the directory with the component that it goes with. Again, this is self-defense against changes in Angular or in components that you create. If the API, the shape of the API or the data changes, then you will be warned. You'll be told exactly what the problem is. Another thing, it's not necessarily TypeScript. It comes from the ECMAScript committees. You can get it in other transpilers, is decorators. So for example, this component decorator, it has the @ sign in front, it is something that wraps the thing after it. So this class becomes a component because of this decorator, which then can be configured with the argument passed into it. In Angular 1, we didn't have TypeScript, we didn't have decorators necessarily. So this was all done by convention, by having a argument list that you pass that had to have magical names that might get blown up when you minified. Dependency injection. This is a really cool place to apply the benefits that we get from TypeScript. In Angular applications, it's like the sea of components out there and services that you're pulling into a view or a component and using to do an HTTP request, look up routing information, talk to a database, whatever. And pulling those things in the old days was hard because you had these magical names. Now it's a lot easier because of type information when you use TypeScript with Angular. So for example, in my homepage component, let's say I want to display the current route. So in the constructor, I can say route, yeah, activated route. And at this point, I've told Angular to go find an instance of the component of class activated route, pass it into my constructor with the name of route. And I might then want to say, what is the path, and show it in the template. This dot route path equals route dot, and I'm like, what? I don't know what this stuff is. How about the route config? Yeah, that's getting warmer. What, path? Yeah, that's what it is, except I need to put a type information on that. So that's a string, and I can now, in my template, say the route path. Reload. And on my home page, it shows the route path. Again, dependency injection, it went and found a component of that class, passed it in under this name. On to the, let's see, one of the last things I want to show about Angular is, or TypeScript and Angular, abstract classes. This is an abstract class called onInit, which is part of Angular's lifecycle methods. The creation of a component is done in stages, and you can put code hooks in for different stages. What the hell is onInit? Well, it just means your class has to have an ng onInit method. If you do not have an ng onInit method, then the compiler will complain to you. Very specifically, ng onInit is missing. No kind of hope you find out when you've reloaded your browser. Tells you exactly what the error is. So in the world of Angular lifecycle management, that assignment is actually better done later on in the path. Let's see. Yep, that fixes it. So I moved it from the constructor to the lifecycle path, which actually helps in testing. I want to test this component. I don't want it to do 50 things during construction. I might want to construct it with a bunch of mocks and then test things part by part. In fact, the better way to do this in Angular is to extract this into a different method. Route. I'm missing something. Okay, I will stop on the Angular part at this because I'm a little bit over. I was going to show doing the interface bag of data in the Angular side as well. Angular has something on top of TypeScript called the language service, which gives even more information that's specific to Angular. I had a little bit of trouble on that, so I'm not going to show it. Best word of any presentation: in conclusion. TypeScript lets you have have some self-defense against the frameworks you use, against your coworkers, and even against yourself to formalize the contracts, and always fail fast. Any final questions? Come to the JetBrains booth if you have any questions or corrections. Thank you for showing up.